morning and welcome to DisruptEDtv, where every little idea that you pick up from our program could be an idea that could change your school for the better. And our guest today is Sheriff Shaun Golden of the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Golden, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
And maybe you could start by, I think the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office is a particularly good example of how law enforcement can partner with the academic community.
Sure. Well, first a little bit about the Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
I've had the honor of being the Monmouth County Sheriff now for 8 years, been in law enforcement and public safety for over 25.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is an unbelievable organization. And when you look at the history of the Sheriff's Office, first of all, the history of the Sheriff in general goes back in terms of the Shire and the Reeve, back to the monarchies when they were the tax collector and the jailer for the king. Mm-hmm. And so to some extent today we still do tax collection and jail as part of the Sheriff's core function. But our Monmouth County Sheriff's Office, 1683, 330 plus years old. It's the oldest law enforcement agency in the county.
Really?
Yeah, and we have over 600 employees day in and day out that work so hard to protect the public and serve our communities. And so that's broken up into 4 major divisions in the Sheriff's Office. We have our Corrections Division, again going back to the jail, our Law Enforcement Division, our Communications Division, 911 Center, and then our Special Operations, which encompasses our Police Academy and our Emergency Management team.
Okay. Great, but your work with the schools?
Our work with schools falls in, pretty much spans all those divisions that I talked about. And so when we look at all of our law enforcement and our corrections and our communication operators, we've partnered with the schools, and year in and year out, and since I've been sheriff, we meet with the superintendents of all of the school districts here at their superintendent's meeting and their administrators meeting. And when we look to see what they want in terms of education initiatives when it comes to law and public safety.
Okay.
And so we're constantly changing our initiatives, and particularly with the modern day challenges for law enforcement. You know, we have the opioid and bullying and a lot of other things that have come up in modern day policing. And so we work with our superintendents and our educators throughout all 53 towns in the county of Monmouth and develop programs for the students. So it's exciting. I mean, we talk about education programs from first graders all the way up to our seniors and everywhere in between. We have over 20 educational programs in the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office.
What are some of the programs?
So we'll start right from, when we talk about first grade, it's access to 911. How to use the 911 system. And so literally we've trained to date over 50,000 first grade students in the county of Monmouth. Pretty much every school district, we take our 911 operators and our volunteers and go into each of the elementary schools throughout the school year and teach our first graders how to access the 911 system, what to expect when they call 911, what they're going to be asked by the 911 operator. And we have a mock setup where we actually put them on the phone with the person on the other side and let them roll through just as they would. And so it's been a fantastic program for them. And so many of our 911 calls that come in are from kids and teenagers, and so they need to know how to access the system. The other is we do dangers of strangers. Obviously when we talk about our youngest students, from first to fifth grade to in that area of fifth grade, about those dangers that are posed both on the internet and in person. How to avoid strangers, what to do if they encounter a stranger, how to react, who to tell, all of those things that impact that. And then on the young adult and teenage side, we have our gang awareness program. Our gang program, we're in and out of the schools talking about gangs. And Monmouth County is, we have gangs. We have gang activity. We see it in some of our communities, just like all the other communities throughout the state of New Jersey. And so how do we best educate our teenagers? We take our gang investigators from the Monmouth County Correctional Institutions, which have a tremendous amount of knowledge in gang activity, gang awareness, and what to look for. And we bring them out into the intermediate schools and talk to our intermediate school kids about the dangers of gangs, how not to get hooked into a gang, how to avoid some techniques that they can use, and again, it's so important because, as you know, the gang activity leads to drug activity and crime activity. And so we have to set that basis early on in our young adults and young teenagers. So, again, they are good for our community.
The more awareness you have, the better.
Yeah, it's all about awareness. I mean, and so those are just some of the programs that we run, from first grade into intermediate school and the high school. And the high school programs, obviously for us, a lot of it is opioid and addiction services now, and our community awareness programs that we have in place. So we run those throughout the high schools.
Good.
That's great. And the nature of the programs is typically, do you address groups of students, I guess, or one?
Well, we have groups. We go in and in the high schools and intermediate schools, we try to do large groups at a time. So again, the superintendents and principals, all the administrators in the schools are very good about our law enforcement team coming in and speaking to the students, sometimes in masses. So we'll have an auditorium sometimes of 200 to 300. And then other times we'll go classroom by classroom, so it really varies. But when you talk about, some of those dangers with opioid addiction, you talk about, and we still can't forget alcohol and alcohol addiction services. Distracted driving is a big one. When you look at the statistics for our teenage population here in the county, distracted driving and deaths on the roadway are one of the number one. Opioids number one killer. And accidents are number two. And so, so for teens, that's where our focus is in the schools and whatever we can do to further that. So we have a pretty aggressive distracted driving program that we go in and out of our high schools, particularly when they're hitting driver's ed age in the high schools, and educating them on the dangers of texting and driving, and there's other forms of distracted driving. I mean, we call it, the drunk driving, distracted driving, and the disregard for speed. I mean, any of those Ds, and we say don't be a D student, and that's kind of our motto when we're in educating the schools. Don't be a D student when it comes to driving, stay off the phone, don't engage in alcohol or substance abuse when you're operating a motor vehicle. And obey the speed limits, because those are the number one causes of accidents and accident fatalities for our teenagers.
Oh, that's great.
Sure.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what that program looks like to the kids.
Awesome.
Really exciting. And we'll be right back on DisruptEDtv with Sheriff Golden.
Stick around.
They come to Brookdale with a passion for healthcare, cybersecurity, fashion merchandising. They graduate and transfer to universities like Georgetown, NJIT, and the Fashion Institute of Technology. They begin their careers as registered nurses, security engineers, and fashion designers. This is what success looks like. And here is where it all starts. This is Brookdale, college redefined, success reimagined. Take your next step at brookdalecc.edu.
Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
I'm Joe Osmendi.
And we have a great guest, Sheriff Shaun Golden, Monmouth County Sheriff's Office, who's talking to us about some of the problems that not only our community here, but also communities all over the country face, in particular opioids.
Sure.
Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, that's our number one, really, in law enforcement, in our law enforcement community here in Monmouth County, which is central in New Jersey, is really our number one concern. You heard me mention distracted driving as being the number two killer. Well, the number one killer amongst teens here in Monmouth is the opioids. And so the use of heroin and prescription drugs has tremendously spiked over the course of the last 10 years. And to alarming rates last year, where we had over 162 deaths by opioids, and we had the second most Narcan deployments, which is the antidote to administer during the opioid overdose. So, it's a challenge for us. And one of the challenges is how do we get in and educate? I mean, it's a multi-pronged approach in law enforcement. We say you can't arrest your way out of the heroin and opioid problem, and you can't. You know, we have to work with the medical field, which we have been in tracking prescription drugs, because 70% of the heroin users stem from the abuse or use of prescription drugs. And so, you know, how do we get out of that psyche of saying, leaving the pill bottles around and saying those scripts are okay, right? And so, you know, some of it has to do with tracking those prescriptions from the medical field. And the others are educating the public, including parents and grandparents. Throw away your medicines. I mean, in the sheriff's office, we run 2 major public service announcements and campaigns a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. And it's clean out your medicine chest, or the medicine chest challenge, either one. And we encourage, in fact, we have drop-off boxes, not just in the sheriff's office. We were the first to have a prescription drop-off box where you could bring in any of your unused medication or prescriptions, dump them in the bin, no questions asked, and we'll destroy them properly. And so now that's in a lot of law enforcement agencies throughout the county. We're proud of that, because during those campaigns we collect tonnage of unused prescription medications.
See, that's an interesting point to me, because people who have surgeries would often tough it out and say, I'm not going to take my whole prescription, I'm not going to run the whole course. But if you leave that around and you've got young people around,
well, there's a couple of things, and it's interesting when I go into the schools, and you know, when we do education programs, I'll say, how many of you have seen a prescription bottle in your house? They'll all raise their hand. Again, because in our society we identify that with a cure. We identify that of pain relief. We identify that bottle as something good, right? That's going to help us out. And so that's part of the psyche problem that we have in total as a community that I think we have to reverse. That you know, those pill bottles are dangerous, and if used, it can lead to other things. You know, and certainly some bad habits. And so it's amazing. Then the second question I'll ask the students are, do you have access to them? Do you know where they are? And they all do.
They all do.
And so, you know, this is where the parents and grandparents who have the majority of the scripts in their house need to step up and really protect those bottles and discard them, more importantly, when they're done using them. So if you're toughing it out and you were given a script, get rid of it, throw it out. You know,
it's funny, you're sending a message. Not only are you making the drugs available to kids who shouldn't have them, but you're also sending a message that it doesn't matter. It's not important. You don't need to protect them. That just makes them
and that's
seem
it.
casual.
And so we try to get in their education program and again, teach our kids that. And to the same extent, Prosecutor Incomiccioni and I in Monmouth County, and along with our Ocean County partners, Sheriff Mastronardi and Prosecutor Coronado, who's led really the fight against opiates in the state of New Jersey. You know, Monmouth and Ocean is really a hotbed. Unfortunately, we have the dubious distinction of being number 1 and 2 in overdose fatalities and those Narcan deployments. So, you know, we're taking corrective action, but again, it's a multi-pronged approach. And when we go in and educate, it's not just the students, it's the parents.
It's the parents.
You know, going to PTA and PTO meetings and speaking just of what we spoke with, and then again, recognition of, you know, their young son or daughter's activities and behavior, and then commitment of services, you know, and how do we bring in addiction, short-term, long-term recovery, detox, all of those other things that, you know, have to be addressed.
So you involve the whole community is what you do.
You have to involve the whole community. You know, when you're talking about medical, if you asked me when I entered law enforcement 25 years ago, would we be involved in social services and involved with doctors and medications? You know, the answer was no. If you asked me, you know, would we be assigning Narcan to our canines so that if they encounter some type of heroin during a search, they too would be affected and have to, you know, be treated with Narcan. You know, I would have said no. And so
it's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe we're at this point. But you know, I think you have to recognize that it's prescription med that leads to a lot of it. Again, you know, 70% when you look at kind of the historical background of heroin users, it's, you know, 70% stems from, you know, prescription med use or abuse. And so it's parents to speak with the parents and the students about that. You know, and the other thing is the students themselves. I mean, you have to listen. It's so important to listen to our young adults and our young teenagers in high school. And I'll tell you a quick story. So we established an ambassador program in the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office. It was great. Principal Allen who is at Neptune now, Poseidon.
Great friend of ours.
Schools.
Good friend of ours.
He's unbelievable. He's been an unbelievable partner in law enforcement for us in public safety. And we came up with this idea, and he helped us administer this idea of an ambassador program, bringing in all of the young leaders from various school districts throughout the county, bring them into the sheriff's office, provide a venue for them to teach us, not lecture them about the use and abuse of heroin and opioids, but teach us. We had breakout sessions, again, facilitated by Principal Allen and our staff, where we had groups. And in those groups, they were very poignant in some of their statements. And one was, we teach a lot of driver's ed, sex ed, phys ed, right? But very little drug education goes on in the high schools. And so we need to change that. Again, we need to have that more discussion. And high school is great, but our high school leaders said, don't look at us. We've already been through all of those offerings and denials or struggles with the drug and opioid. You need to get down into the intermediate schools.
Good point.
You need to speak with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And so we did exactly that, and we took our program that we deliver inside the schools and we brought it to Reach for Your Dreams, where we have recovering addicts and addiction services and those that have been involved, family members who've lost a loved one or a recovering addict who's now successful but continues to fight. We bring them down into the intermediate school level and again try to meet with those small groups and classes to tell their stories and portray the education to our kids in those intermediate schools.
Sheriff Golden, we have to take a break, but before we go into the break, you mentioned during the last break that this isn't a problem of poor communities. This is a problem in every community.
Oh, systemic and suburbia, and we're talking in Monmouth County. Again, we have a very nice county here, and we're the 3rd wealthiest county in the state of New Jersey. Very nice, but targets. We're transient between New York and Philadelphia, and that's where the majority. And you're talking heroin purities and the fentanyl challenges now with the synthetics that are coming in to these locations and finding their way into suburbia, not inner cities.
It takes less of those drugs too.
Sure does.
The great takeaway on that is that, well, you may think it's not happening where you are. It probably is happening where you are.
Oh, yeah. All you need to go on is our website or the prosecutor's website and look at the PIN map, and you'll know exactly where it's happening in terms of your community.
Well, that's great information. We'll be right back after this break with more from Sheriff Golden.
Thank you.
Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
I'm still Joe Osmendi.
It's great.
Alan, Joe, great to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
A real pleasure. Sheriff Golden, you're a terrific guest, and you know a lot, and you've got a lot of experience. And I'm thinking one of the subjects we talked about very briefly was a concern that all parents have, and that is that their kids will fall in with the wrong crowd. And that really is kind of an entree into the whole discussion of gangs. Is that right?
Well, so when you look at our education system in our schools, I mean, it starts a little bit with bullying and anti-bullying. I mean, we have to be sure that our kids are educated, our students are educated in bullying and what they can do and how we can help and how the school can help. Because again, it builds, you have to get out of that no confidence and I'm in the loser crowd, because that's what gangs prey on.
Really? No kidding.
And so that's why I'm tying it in. We need to have, hey, I'm confident. I don't need to be involved with this particular gang over here, because I have a good group of friends. And, I mean, you have to really be aware with your son or daughter of who they're hanging out with, and what they're doing. And so, that's our biggest message to parents. And, so many times parents, including getting back to the heroin conversation, they'll give their son or daughter some money. Do you know where it's going? Did you ask them what they spent the money on that day?
Yeah,
Did they really buy lunch?
Right.
And so, or is it going into some type of gang activity or drug activity, And for us, the anti-gang initiative is one that we're really proud of in the Sheriff's Office. It's a gathering of intelligence information. We have more than 13 identifiable gangs within our communities here in Monmouth County. More self-proclaimed gangs, but 13 gangs that associate with gangs around the country. And
Okay.
you know, you're talking Blood, Crips, MS-13, you know, and those type of gangs that everybody kind of glamorizes on some of the TV shows.
Organized gangs.
Organized gangs. And so it's so important, again, to get in to those intermediate schools and those high schools with our gang awareness program, which our corrections officers do. And they come in and they teach all of the students about gangs, about each one of them, and then how they operate, the tactics they use in terms of pressure and threats, and you know how to deal with that. And also, we've taken that program and we've put it on for school administrators.
You have.
Interestingly enough, some of the schools have called us and said, hey, can you educate our teachers and administrators to look out for those kind of activities so that they can recognize any gang activity in terms of you know, who's hanging around the school, who's hanging down the street at the convenience store after school, in what groups, you know, what do they see and what do they recognize, any graffiti activity, any of those, and strangers to the school that are lingering around after school, you know, that normally don't belong with that school. So all of these signs that we go out and not only teach our students in Monmouth County in various high schools, but we teach the administrators and teachers.
Well, one of the things that struck me as you were talking is the connection between bullying and bullying behavior and gang activity, which I don't think a lot of people.
You have to make that connection. That and you have to keep our. I mean, listen, you have to keep your son or daughter and your students busy. You know, after school activities, sporting activities. You know, when we find, and studies have shown, if they're involved in those, they're less likely to join up with a gang, right? And so if you don't have that, there's so many opportunities in terms of having your son or daughter volunteer after school in some type of food bank program or some type of community program. You know, you're talking Boys and Girls Club, you're talking any type of after school activity, and that's why in the Sheriff's Office, and particularly during the summertime, we run Sheriff's Youth Week. Which a lot of police departments run some type of youth week in the county, whether it's, you know, Freehold Borough, Manalapan, any of the towns, Belmar, run some type of program to keep the young adults busy during that. Our Sheriff's Youth Week has been tremendously successful in terms of having over 150 teenagers from all over the county, different towns represented, and it's really interesting because they come to the police academy for a week and they experience the whole police academy as you would being a police recruit. And so that includes a little yelling by the drill instructors in the morning, you know, and a little PT, but some great classroom experiences, some CSI experience where they do crime scenes. They go out and do some water safety in the pools. You know, they get to deal with the canines and the helicopter, and so it's a really great experience for them. And they graduate just like they would as police graduation at the end of the week. And so the parents come in on the Friday evening, and we graduate, and they line up in formation, and we graduate just as they would. And the parents themselves will say, "Wow, what a transformation in 1 week!" You know.
And you're preparing these kids to be community leaders.
Community leaders, and you don't know, and they have an interest in probably law and public safety, which is what they signed up for, and so it's a great way to take them through and meet law enforcement execs and administration.
Whether they ever end up choosing a career in it or not, at least they understand. Some of the issues that are facing,
and that's what we strive for in the sheriff's office, is educating our teens, particularly if they want to come into law enforcement and public safety field. And so we work with some of the law and public safety high schools, specialty schools, including the county, and Monmouth has one, and we bring them in, and they share the same experience.
That's good. Now, what excites me, what's exciting about this is that I know that states mandate a certain amount of contact between law enforcement and schools, but it sounds to me like you go way beyond that.
I think if you look agency by agency, one, I have more resources in the sheriff's office. Certainly, we have all those employees, over 600, and with the various programs, we are able to touch the minds of a lot of students in and out of the 53 communities. You know, we have over 130 schools in the county. You know, some private, and we're able to go in and out of all those schools and really make some impressions on some of those issues that we talked about.
And you have a dedication to do this too. That's important.
Has to be dedicated. Well, I love it. Myself, I'm an educator. I've been a professor at Monmouth University.
You're a teacher.
So very passionate about it, and making sure that our staff at the Sheriff's Office,
Right.
passionate about teaching our young adults, so they're ready to take it on and tackle some of the challenges they face.
The other element too about this is that it's not just about the enforcement side of things, it's also very much about the demand side of bad behavior and bad activity.
Very, very much. And so, enforcement, and another thing we can touch on real quick is even if you fall into that bad behavior, and let's say you have an arrest, we're proud in the Sheriff's Office here in our correctional facility, we run the only high school GED program in the state of New Jersey for a county correctional institution.
Great.
And so we partnered with Monmouth Ocean Educational Services Commission with their education program, and they bring in some of the teachers and do on-site and computer learning so that our inmates who are there for rehabilitative purposes, to become a more productive member of society. These are minor offenses that stay no more than a year in our facility, and we want them to get out in the community in terms of job placement and GED, and so we work a lot on that.
Another really valuable point. It's even if a kid does happen to take the wrong turn, they always have the opportunity to take the right turn back.
And that's the way we look at it, and we want to provide them with that opportunity.
Give them an opportunity, exactly.
Sure.
Terrific. Okay, we need to take a break, but more with Sheriff Golden on DisruptEDtv after this. Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. This guy's name is Joe Asamendi,
And that's Al Cini.
and we're really blessed to have with us today Sheriff Golden from the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office. And during the break, we were talking about how you really can't connect with a kid until you've engaged that kid. And you've got programs that are pretty engaging for students.
Certainly
and
do.
I immediately turned to K-9. Maybe you can talk a little bit about
We were
that.
saying how the seriousness of some of the programs with distracted driving and opiates.
Sure.
The canines are on the lighter side. So
Okay.
we bring the canines in and out of the schools and different programs, and they're a hit. They're a hit right up
absolutely.
until Monmouth University.
Right.
They do a tremendous job. We have 8 canines, now 9 in the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office. One's in training, and it's unbelievable. They're all they're cross-trained in different ways. So we have some canines that are narcotics and tracking dogs, patrol tracking dogs. So they're able to track a bad guy down. And then we have 3 bomb dogs that are used for bomb detection. Do a lot of our threats that we receive in terms of bomb threats. And a lot of facilities and venues, so when we have large venues in the county, marathons, things at the malls and the like, our bomb dogs are in and out of those critical infrastructure and event facilities. And our Bloodhound Sky. So our Bloodhound Sky is, a bloodhound that has been a tremendous tracking dog for us. One of the best in the state of New Jersey, has won 5th.
There's
in the
competition.
national
You say there's competition.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
And I mean, Miles, the dog will track. I understand from the trainer, the dog will track until it actually, he or she actually collapses. That's how bloodhounds are designed. And so really interesting, but has had tremendous amount of successful apprehensions for us, and not just for us, because our canines are in and out of a lot of the communities in law enforcement here in Monmouth County and beyond, because a lot of small towns can't afford their own canine unit.
Right.
They're very expensive to maintain, and so we really have a tremendous amount of economic value by sharing that service throughout all of the towns in Monmouth County, and our law enforcement agencies take advantage of it. It's been
What's
tremendous.
interesting about that is on TV shows and everything, you see these canines doing these great things, and you say, well, that's only on TV, but it's not.
No,
It really is real stuff.
It's real. They're out
Yeah,
there
right.
today, and they'll
Yeah,
be
really.
called today.
Yeah,
As we
that's cool.
speak, I listen to them get called out pretty much every day into some community around here. But when they go back and do education initiatives for our teenagers and young adults, really connect. I mean,
Right,
they
sure.
make a tremendous amount of connection. And Monmouth University, who I'm so proud of, we spoke of before as an alum and a professor over there. We have sororities that raise money for the Canine Vest Fund.
Wow.
And they do it every year, and so they'll
Yeah.
do some fundraisers throughout the course of the school year and present us with a check to vest one of our canines. So we have a new canine in training, and that canine too will need a vest.
Good.
And unfortunately, and the reason why they need a vest is we were one of the first agencies, the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office. We lost K-9 solo during a barricaded subject, and our K-9 was shot. And killed in the line of duty. And that actually prompted state laws to change about assaults on police canines because of ours. And we're glad to say that we lead the way in protecting those dogs. And we were the first to have the best. They stiffened, rightfully so.
Well,
rightfully so.
Great.
You know, those canines are extension of our law enforcement officers.
They
train, you know, the amount of training they go through is actually more than what the law enforcement officer goes through in the police academy. And then they're out there and certainly of tremendous value to our community.
That's terrific. Now, you also mentioned too, it's not just about the sheriff's office. You partner with the fire department.
Oh, well, it was so important. I mean, when you look at public safety, first, we're the public safety answering point for 911 for so many communities here in Monmouth County. Our public safety communications center processes over 780,000 calls a year for service, and a lot of it includes fire and EMS.
Right.
And so, you know, we're integrated fully with the fire marshal's office and the chiefs, fire chiefs, and the EMS captains. But we have an EMS task force. Right. In terms of being able to respond. So we have mass casualty equipment. We have 2 buses. One of the buses were out at a fire this morning where we had to evacuate one of the structures, and you know they're able to facilitate that evacuation. And so, you know, it's all, when you're protecting the public, it's all about cooperation and coordination and fire and EMS. We bring fire and EMS into our Sheriff's Youth Week program, where they go to the fire academy, experience the smokehouse, put on the Scott packs, work with the fire training facility over at our Monmouth County Fire Academy. And same thing with our EMS. We'll bring in Monarch and talk about the medevac helicopter, and the medics and EMTs will talk about and deliver some first aid training for the
practical experience is so much more
hands-on. It's got to be tactile and practical.
Right.
I find is the best learning environment for our young adults. I know I was that way when I went to school. I'm still that way, and so you know, it's not all about lecturing in the classroom. You know, it has to be tactile and practical.
That's what makes a difference. Yeah. That's great. And you keep referring to it as public safety. It's not just law enforcement.
No, and that's it's so important that you refer to it now as public safety because it truly is when you look at the amount of agencies that are involved, and not just fire and EMS, you're talking about emergency management coordinators, you're talking about training public works employees, you're hospital staff in mass casualty, you know, those types of threats against us, when we look at threats against our homeland or our terrorist attacks, all of these agencies have to be involved. When we do our tabletop exercises and our practical exercises, which we do a lot of, you know, again, the Sheriff's Office, we run emergency management. And, you know, so we're in charge of all the critical infrastructure and response to that critical infrastructure should something go wrong. And, you know, when you're looking about active shooters in our schools and our malls or train derailments, you know, we're right over here. You know, we have a major train corridor that runs through and major bus depots.
You have to be prepared for
we have
all
a lot
that.
of community. Have to be prepared for all that.
Maybe that gets us into one more difficult subject before we wrap up the program, and that's firearm safety. You have programs for that.
We do, and listen, you have to, when you talk about firearms, I mean, we have some of the strictest gun laws in the state of New Jersey, but you have to, again, it comes down to education, and particularly with our own law enforcement officers in the academy, and how to safeguard their weapons, and you know, when they get home, and the like, and so all that, it's public safety, and so if there's a public safety program or initiative, we do it at the Monmouth County Sheriff's Office.
That's great. And but we're coming up on that part of our program where you get to talk directly into the camera and tell people how to reach you. But I know you have an app for that.
So we do. So I'll talk at the
can.
camera. We have a Monmouth County Sheriff's Office app. It's downloadable on the iStore. You can go to Apple or you can go to Google and download the app. mcsonj.org is our website. That will have all our Twitter and our social media feeds, our Facebook and YouTube channels on it. But you can download the app. The app is great in terms of receiving real-time notifications from our emergency management staff should something happen.
Well, that's Sheriff Golden,
Oh,
it's such a pleasure to have you on the program today.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of you for joining us today on DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
I'm Joe Osamendi.
And we really hope you'll take a few of the ideas that Sheriff Golden shared with us today. And wherever you are in the country, if you could partner with your local public safety, law enforcement, fire department, EMS organizations it's a real horizon opener for the students in your school. Thank you all again, and we'll see you again on Disrupted TV.
Pleasure, Sheriff
Great,
Golden.
thank you.
Thank you.